Eric, this is one of those episodes where we talk about our favorite topic.
Yes. Hunky men.
Paulie Shore. Yeah, hunky men and Paulie Shore.
Same thing. Same thing.
Yeah,
he's the iconic picture of the hunky man.
This is true. This is true. And I want, look, we love to interact with those of the Iron Cult. Go ahead if you're on the YouTube channel and leave a comment in the comment section below with your favorite Paulie Shore film. There's a lot. His filmography, it rivals any great actor or actress, right? You look at De Niro, like Meryl Streep, Nicholson, it doesn't matter, Denzel Washington, Shore, right? Shore is basically like that unspoken, always tonic that's there lurking in the shadows. Encino Man, his ability to embody that character, that kind of brain dead, early 20s lost youth, was method acting at its finest.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get into it, but Biodome, forget about it, right? I mean, come on. That's just, there's very few. Okay, some people might say, I don't know, guys. It kind of seems like Paulie Shore always plays Paulie Shore. And I would say, how long has this man's career been? Since the early 90s, he's been in character for like 30 plus years. Like,
That's
get out of
dedication.
here.
That's dedication, bro.
Yeah. Exactly.
Speaking of dedication, Eric,
Hmm.
this episode today, we have someone who's been personal training individuals for damn near 30 years.
Yeah, basically the same timeline that Paulie Shore has been killing it in the theaters. Chad Landers has been killing it as a personal trainer. No, he's definitely, he's un member of the cult. Like if you look at some of the private messages I have with Chad Landers, it's us talking about lifting, bodybuilding, getting yoked, and like Sandow trophies and collections from the late 1800s, early 1900s on bodybuilding, like historical, physical culture, iconic pieces of history. So we're simpatico on that end. But really, we wanted to bring Chad on because he really kind of gets to the heart of what the art of a personal trainer is. He's the 2018 NSCA Personal Trainer of the Year, and he's done so much in the world of trying to help personal trainers be successful in their careers. We didn't talk about it much in this episode, but he and James Krieger have like a how to be financially secure course for personal trainers. And I know that when I first got into personal training, we're talking just out of the Air Force, I was like 21. I think because you were like, here's the way it is. Like, we don't really educate kids on anything about finances in the US. Like for our international listeners, you're often surprised when you hear, oh, I had to do my taxes. That means that even if you're not self-employed, you actually have to physically fill out forms on an annual basis. We don't even get taught how to do that. Like, for example, in New Zealand, that just comes out automatically. Don't worry about it. And it's only self-employed individuals who actually have to, quote unquote, do taxes every year. Blew my mind when I got here. But anyway, being taught anything about financial literacy is really only something that, unfortunately, probably people who are already in a good financial position get taught, which makes sense. They understand that. That's why, at least part of the reason why they're in that position, so they have the luxury of being able to pass that on and teach their kids. But it's not part of like the public school curriculum. So anyway, when I first got attracted to the idea of being a personal trainer, it was like, oh shit, you can charge how much per hour? Damn. Didn't think about the fact that that's like not after taxes, that I'm not getting benefits, and that I'm basically working, dollars for hours. Also didn't think about the fact that, hey, if you're working at a gym and, hiring that space, contracting, or as an employee, when you're not actually personal training somebody, you need to be hunting down leads, and you're getting paid either nothing if you're, just contracting in that space, or if you're an employee, it's like gym staff hours, which is like minimum wage. So anyway, often what is presented to the personal trainer, it sounds like a much more economically viable career than what it actually is. And on top of that, it also takes a certain type of personality to be successful as a personal trainer. So anyway, in this episode, Chad gets into some really great practical tips for ways to make this a sustainable career. We talk about the type of person that you need to be successful. And also one thing, and I was thinking about it so much, and we talked about this off air after the fact, but when you talk to me, Omar, about my personal training philosophy, it's always about getting my clients to the point where they don't need me, training them out of like training them so they don't need me, right? And that almost sounds like, oh my God, you're training yourself out of a job. Well, it's no, that they become positive referrals. And that actually was a pretty successful model for me when I was a trainer. However, it didn't always work. I did have some clients who worked with me long-term, and maybe inaccurately, I kind of viewed that as a failure. Like, oh, I couldn't find the thing for this person to have that autonomy and competence to go out and train on their own. But what I started to realize, because we talked to Chad and he talked about retention and really being available and presence for someone emotionally and still doing all the things I'm talking about, giving them autonomy, giving them support, building skills, and helping them to enjoy the training as much as possible. But he's had clients who he's worked with for 20, 30 years. And I think the bias that I had as a trainer that I probably didn't even let go of all the way based on my idea of everyone should eventually not need me is that maybe not everyone is simply built like me to enjoy lifting long term. And anyway, we didn't get into it in the in the main podcast, but I wanted to talk about it in the intro because you and I had a discussion off camera, Omar, how I think that is a bias. Like I think most personal trainers, obviously, they're deciding to get paid to have other people work out. They love training. And I think it is an assumption that is probably not true that with enough autonomy, with the right introduction, that everyone is going to love being physical and moving and training or going to a gym. And I think that may not be the case. And hey, if you can build autonomy, confidence, and have someone comfortable in the gym, but they enjoy it more by working with you and they can be more consistent and it's worth it economically and financially for them to work with you, then hell, more power to you. And I think that is something I've just never really put in terms of that perspective until this episode with Chad.
Eric, well said, man. I actually share the same bias as you, as do probably all personal trainers. We love to lift. Why wouldn't you love to lift? And that's in the same fashion as you, granting someone the idea like, hey, you know what? You think you're in here for this reason? Let me try and help you out. Let me help you develop that personal autonomy. What are your goals? Send you off onto your own into the Wild West, right? 5 goes west. Is the way we visualized it, but also maybe we didn't experience it collectively, probably between both of us. We have like a decade and change of personal training experience. You probably will start to notice the patterns more evident the longer you are as a trainer. Well, wait a second. Not every single person, to your point, enjoys training. Like that's just a fact of life. Like maybe for us, it seems asinine. Like, wait a second, you don't like lifting barbells? It's like, no, they're doing like health, longevity, other factors. Or for many clients, as we are fully aware of, they come knocking on a personal trainer after some sort of incident, some health-related issue. So the basis that they start from is entirely different than the young bucks, you and myself, lifting because we're like, oh, Sandow, bro, let's look like Sandow. So they're entirely different reasons. And there is, I also think that sometimes online, people devalue the actual contributions a personal trainer makes to clients, and we can't undersell that. And so I think Chad does a very good job of explaining that other side. A long-time personal trainer working with clients long-term, because to an outsider, like once again, to like some muscle hunk, it's like, oh, you're like, that person really just needs to develop how to go out on their own. I'm like, do they though? Like, is that for everyone? Is that what their goal is? Like, why are they even here in the first place? Is it the same as you? Oh, it's not. They're not here to look hunky. Okay, sit back, relax. And this is, for many, time and money well spent.
Yeah. You know, I framed in the conversation, which I think actually goes well with this one, with Chip Conrad, that for a lot of people, you know, their introduction to a trainer or to fitness is like going to the dentist.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, reframing that and, you know, trying to change that, you might be able to change that to the point where it's something that people enjoy and get and recognize the positive benefits from, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to become their chosen recreation. You know, for me, that when I go to train in the gym, there are elements. It's not the same as deciding to play a game, right? Yeah. It is fun. Like just objectively for me, not objectively, subjectively for me.
No,
when I go to lift weights, absolutely. That's kind of how I viewed it before, obviously. So anyway, that was a new insight. But anyway, enough of me and Omar talking. Let's get Chad Landers to talk, because this guy is a amateur physical culture historian and collector. He's been a personal trainer for 3 decades. The man's in his early 50s. You wouldn't know it by looking at him because he's just a picture of health and fitness. And not only that, also, like I said, personal trainer of the year and someone who has a lot of practical tips with all that experience, both to help personal trainers not only do better by their clients, but also to find ways to be successful and secure long-term.
Eric.
Omar.
as always, I think we should catch everyone up as to what's going on in the life of cult leaders Eric Helms and Omar Isuf. And I'll give the brief synopsis. Myself and Eric have been going through what can only be described as midlife existential crises. We believe we emerged victorious from it after doing 3 episodes talking about essentially we're not over our peak. What is a peak? Does a peak even matter? We love ourselves for the way that we are, and we love each other, I think was my conclusion. Again, it's open interpretation. But we're going to have a reckoning. Yeah, Eric, I sense still a little underlying in Chad. You could probably sense this too. Tension. I won't say
it's
of
kind
what
of a
variety.
Sexual tension in a
Thank
way.
you. Thank you. Yeah,
I'm just saying.
Chad, you sensed it right off. So someone said on my Instagram, and I'll let you carry the torch from here, Eric, the proverbial torch, if you understand what I'm saying. They said, will they or will they not get together? It's driving me nuts, and the cult wants to know. That was a legitimate listener, so it's not only me that's feeling it. I'm not putting this on you. There's something underlying there. So go ahead, carry the torch. Midlife existential crisis. Where are we on our journey, and how does it relate to this episode today?
Well, this is a very phallic torch that I'll be carrying, and it's an honor to carry it. First,
it's not a torch.
It's hot. Chad is on fire, and that also connects nicely with the torch / matchstick we're dealing with. But I will say this to the dear listener who mentioned, that concern of will they or won't they get together. Friends was an objectively bad show. However, it kept people hooked because they weren't sure what was going to happen with Ross and Rachel. And the mistake they made, their downfall, was they actually made a decision there instead of just continually to string you along and then just letting the show fade into the ether. They could have milked that another 5 seasons until, that cast really hated each other and it was visible even in their acting. And that's where we want to get to here in Iron Culture. And we're not there yet, folks. So we got to let that tension build until it turns into resentment, outward hate, and then eventually we just both disintegrate right before your very eyes, which is really what you want to see.
No, that's perfect. I'll just say quickly before we get to the topic of the day that I could never hate you. I hate that I love you so much. In fact, I'm most of all, Chad, I think I'm mad at myself for the situation that we're in, and that's why we're turning to you. A legitimate guru here, someone who's been in the damn space for a long period of time, because as you're saying to us off air, we're joking about, all right, yeah, we're midway through our lives, we're trying to figure things out. You're like, man, you guys are young pups still, just starting out. We heard you started lifting in the 80s. You've been a personal trainer for almost 30 years now, doing the damn thing. And I think this is a conversation that is necessary. There are many people probably, and they could correct me in the comments, I'm open to be wrong here, that I would put forth a lot of the trainers we see today start maybe online, or a lot of their base is training people online. And there is a very rich repository of skill sets one develops from training people in person. Myself, I experienced this. Eric experienced this. We both started off as personal trainers. So we know real can recognize real. And when someone's been in the game for almost 30 years, doing the damn thing, having a high quality when it comes to client relationships, fostering those things, refining the gradual process, and gleaming those insights over 30, 40 years. Well, we know this is going to be a powerhouse episode that everyone, not just trainers, need to listen to. So we're very pleased to have Chad Landers on today's episode.
Thank you, guys. I'm happy to be here. All you're basically saying is I'm old in a nice way, but I still appreciate it. And it's true. So what the hell? You can't do anything about it. I'm just glad to still be doing it after this long. So I'm doing something right, apparently.
I think you're doing a lot of things right. We got the 2018 NSCA Personal Trainer of the Year on, folks. And we weren't kidding. Was it 93 that you first moved to LA and started training? Is that accurate?
Yeah, in 93. If I take a step back, so I first got my first set of dumbbells when I was 9 years old. So that would have been like 1977. And even before that, there's pictures of me when I'm probably, 5 years old in my underwear making bodybuilding poses. So I'm guessing I probably saw like Arnold Schwarzenegger on like the Mike Douglas show or some, 70s variety show, something like that. I don't know. I don't remember, but I do distinctly remember saying when people would ask you, what you want to be when you grow up, I want to be a muscle man. Now, I don't know what that meant to me at that young of an age, but I was always, for whatever reason, enamored by that larger than life bodybuilder type thing for whatever reason. Now, I really started lifting more for football in junior high and on into high school, but still, my first book was Bob Kennedy's Hardcore Bodybuilding, The Blood, Sweat, and Tears of Pumping Iron. I got that in like 7th grade. That's back in the day when you had to order it, out of a catalog and wait till it shipped to you to your door. And you're like, oh my God, before you knew anything about steroids or any of that stuff. So yeah, I started at a very young age being enamored with the whole thing. Didn't know I could make it a career. I didn't know I could be a muscle man. I just went to the University of Illinois initially as a biology major, and I'd always thought maybe I'd be like a wildlife biologist or something like that. I grew up in a rural area, and biology was my thing, but also obviously a love of sports, captain of the football team in high school and that type of thing. So once I got to campus, Illinois is a Big Ten school, a huge school. I realized they had a department of kinesiology, and that I could actually major and put that biology and sports together. And there it was. So I had zero clue what I would do with that as a career. I just knew that's what I was going to get my degree in. And believe me, I got a lot of shit for it from not from the people who counted, but definitely certain members of the family were like, well, what are you going to do with that? And I'm like, I don't know, but it's what I like. So I'm going to get a degree in this and go from there. So while I was still in school, I was already managing a health club. I'd gotten a job from another student who lived in Champaign-Urbana, worked at a local health club. He got me on there part-time, and then I was managing the place before I ever graduated. So I really was already in the gym life before I'd ever got out of college. But I realized early on, this was early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, that as a manager of one of the best health clubs in town, I was making like $18,500 a year and was told that I was overpaid. So I'm like, well, I probably have topped out what I'm going to do in this location. And I was also in this on again, off again relationship with my girlfriend for 5.5 years. And, I'm very wise about certain things. And I could see we were going to get back together. The default would be get married. We'd probably have a kid. I knew we'd get divorced because the relationship was, oil and water. So I'm like, well, I'm never going to leave here if I don't do it now. So what I did was I packed up. I had family that lived in Las Vegas that I wasn't really close with, but it was the only place I had to go to move forward. So moved to Vegas in 92 and got a job at Bally's casino in the health spa. And there I was just a host in the health spa. And I would get job offers of all different kinds from all over the world just because people liked me. I was a good looking young guy who wasn't afraid to talk to people. I guess they could such a certain genuine, maybe Midwestern ethos. I don't know. But one of those jobs happened to be a personal trainer. A guy was opening up a private studio here in Los Angeles and needed trainers to work for him. And so I'm like, I'm your guy, because I hated living in Vegas. And the one time I visited LA, I liked it. So I moved down here in April of 93. Worked for him for a couple of years, realized he didn't really value me either. I wasn't paid that much. And I was like the only trainer in there who actually had a degree in kinesiology. Others had college degrees in whatever. But I had a real degree in the field. And also I was starting to get all of my clients on referral from other clients. I wasn't taking any of the walk-in traffic anymore. And I'm like, well, this guy should at least respect and appreciate the fact that I'm generating new business for him on all these referrals, and he didn't do it. He's like, this is what I pay, take it or leave it. So I left it, went out to at that time, a Gold's gym that allowed personal trainers to basically train clients rent free. They were just happy to have more customers. So that's what I did for 8 years until I was able to open up my own gym, private, personal training studio. And so what I did basically was take all the things that I had seen working in health clubs, in a spa, working at a private studio, and especially the things that I saw that I thought were done wrong. And I tried to eliminate those things and do them right in my gym and treat people the way that I thought they should be treated, both trainers and clients. And now I just, come up on my 19th anniversary of having my own gym. So yeah, between a gym owner for 19 years, training people for nearly 30, I've certainly been in the gym business for longer than 30 years. So I've pretty much seen it all. I've made all the mistakes. And it's funny how things come full circle, how, like we were talking earlier, I collect a lot of books and old antiquities from weightlifting and bodybuilding, and the stuff that Eugene Sandow was doing in 1900 pretty much is the exact same stuff that works today. And so we've had to go like kind of full circle in all these different ways to just get back to the basics repeated well is really what you need to do. It's a consistency thing. And I think that a lot of trainers have a hard time with that because they don't feel like they have enough moxie or whatever themselves to keep clients entertained or whatever it is they've got to do with just the basics. So they've got to have some other kind of bells and whistles to keep the clients entertained. And some clients may be like that. They may need you to have certain equipment at your gym. I mean, there's a big celebrity trainer who that's all he does is pack his gym full of the latest crazy stuff because that's what says his clients want, and more power to him. But for me, it's like my clients and by de facto, even the other trainers' clients that come to the gym, they're getting what I know works, and it doesn't have to be fancy. I just have to get them to do it regularly and to enjoy it. So my goal has always been for them, the 2 or 3 hours most people spend a week with it, I want that to be their favorite hours of the week. Because if it's their favorite hours of the week, they're going to keep doing it. And if they keep doing it, they're going to get results. If they get results, they're going to refer me, and I'm never going to have to worry about getting new customers. And I've always been like that. That's why I measure retention in decades. I have multiple clients who've been with me for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. My oldest was 25 years, and only she passed away, or she'd still be coming today. So that's the way that I think that all businesses should be striving for is repeat customers, not having to always churn. And the gym business historically, at least the big box gym business, has always been about getting as many new people to sign up as you can and hope none of them ever show up. Just stick them on check free. Back in the day, it was check free. Now I'm sure it's something else. But back in the day, you get all these people to sign up and have their $20 a month coming out of their checking or savings account, small enough amount monthly that they wouldn't want to cancel because they have the intention of coming in. But you hope they never come in because you can't sell an overcrowded gym. So the real business model behind most big box gyms is not to train people, is not to get them in shape. It's just to get them paying monthly and not showing up. And so to me, that was just wrong, so that's why I'm a one-on-one trainer. I am not a small group. I'm not, semi-private or any of that. All that to me I understand why people do it. And especially in certain markets where maybe they can't command the rates that I can command one-on-one, why it makes financial sense. But for me, the meat and potatoes of training is that one-on-one stuff. And it's not even the training itself. It's what's going on during the rest periods. It's what's going on before and after the session that you're talking about. And it's life. Because as you guys talked about on the previous episode, the gym is a microcosm of life. And so if I can get people to believe in themselves in the gym and to do something they've never done before, to have this progression, and all of a sudden they see, wow, you know what? I did that. Nobody did that for me. I showed up. I put in the time. I didn't think I could do it. Now I could. You know what? I can ask for that raise, or I can quit this job and go start my own business, or I can get a divorce, or I can ask this person to marry me, or whatever it is. I've seen that time and time again. I think that's where the real power is in personal training. It's in the relationships that you build, and we're just using fitness as the conduit to really just create relationships.
That's well said, Omar. He just spoke to the, I would say, the emotional side of what Chip Conrad spoke to just recently. How he was saying, hey, I'm traveling the wilderness right now, training in the world rather than in a gym, because the gym is there to train me to therefore move. And I think this is something that the personal training industry probably doesn't really recognize until it's a quote unquote problem. Like, oh, you're 85, you've just had a stroke, and now you are struggling to actually get up off of the couch or off of the toilet in some cases. Now we need to give you training for quality of life and ADL, activities of daily living. This is something that Chip is basically saying, hey, that's what we do all the time in the gym. So you learn skills in the gym and you take them out into the world, whether you're an athlete or just someone who wants to be able to move well. And I think what you've really highlighted there, Chad, is that is not just a physical process. Making moves in life can happen if you build the self-efficacy in the gym. And I think that's a fantastic message. And I think if that is the underlying ethos that, I don't know how long it's been a part of your ethos or the way you've understood what you do in the gym as a trainer, then it's no wonder you have repeat customers for decades. I think that's because that's an invaluable skill. That's everything, right?
Right. I mean, it's everything, no matter what business you're in. And so you're right in that not just trainers, maybe need to hear this type of message, because if you want somebody to come back to your store or come back to your restaurant or purchase again from your online clothing business or whatever it is, you have to treat people well and with respect. And all that kind of behavior has devolved, certainly over the last, 5 years, 10 years. We start to see just, and social media makes this even worse. People can talk crap about each other all the time with no repercussions. People can just make shit up completely, and there's no price to pay for that. And so it all becomes about spending all this time. I mean, I was thinking about this actually this morning. I was like, if trainers spent more time trying to figure out how to take care of their clients and less time how to impress other trainers online, they would be a hell of a lot busier. But most of them, all they care about is making sure that one of us, because we're known in the business, maybe likes or shares their shit, But that's not what's important. I would be super successful, as successful as I am now, with zero social media. I mean, look at my social media. I've got like 3,500 followers on Instagram. I don't get customers because of Instagram, and I don't pursue Instagram as, maybe someday I will. Maybe I'll retire from in-person stuff, and I'll be like, what, I need to market myself selling a program or whatever, and I will. But that's really not what's important. And so many times now, like you were saying earlier, people start off in the online space without ever having trained anybody in person, so they don't know how to really foster and develop a relationship, and how to read between the lines with how somebody's feeling on a given day. All they can do is play around with numbers and say, well, I gave you this program and you did this many reps. Next time, try that many reps, or, whatever, or tweak their macros. I mean, to me, that's not training. That's not what the business is about. And I think that if COVID has taught me anything, it's that people crave that even more. I mean, just look at Peloton stock. It went way, way up when COVID started. Pelotons are flying off the shelf. It's a game changer. Nobody's going back to the gym ever again. Now look at Peloton stock today. It's cratered. And why is that? It's because people still, as cool as it is to be at the bike in your house and have this virtual trainer on a screen, it's still way better to have that in-person interaction with somebody who really knows you and cares about you and wants the best for you. And will tell you on that day at the gym, oh, you know what? I actually think we should just go get coffee. You're too stressed out. You don't need to work out today. Let's just go talk, and maybe they need to come in and maybe they're not feeling like working out. And it's like, what, let's just start. Let's just see what happens. And all of a sudden they have the best workout they've ever had. You just don't know. And that's something that you can't learn in the online space. You just can't do that. And so I think that at the very least, if somebody wants to be successful in the online space, they should at least start in person and see what it's like, and see if they even like people. Because I can easily train somebody online now because of the decades I've spent training people in person, because I know how to talk, and there's a shorthand, I guess, in interacting with people that I've been able to develop over that time, that I just don't think a lot of people starting out deal with. So they think that, well, I've got a certain degree or a certain certification, or I've got a 6-pack and an Instagram, and so I should just be successful, but that's really not the way that it works, at least, not most of the time.
Eric, man, what I'm hearing here from Chad, this is some chicken soup for the personal training soul, because I think unless you've experienced it, then you might be unaware. The power of what Chad's describing here, the intense interpersonal relationships that you foster through training someone, where it is an exchange of ideas, of emotions that are taking place in real time. that certainly is possible, I think, online. Like, got to give a shout out to 3DMJ. It's like, but Eric was training people in person, Alberto Nunez, like a bunch of the individuals developed those necessary skill sets that they could then apply. But if you develop, I think, in a vacuum exclusively online, it's a lot harder. And one of the things that I wanted to say, Chad, it's funny that I'm sure Eric has stories that he could relate to what you were sharing about either a client that shows up, doesn't really feel like training, you're getting to the bottom of it. And we talk about those philosophical underpinnings of why people lift it in the first place. That a lot of those conversations to be had, it's experiential, so they're going through it with you. It's also something that they're processing in their own time, but you being there in person as a support, as someone to help them navigate this very treacherous road, there is power in that. And it's, I would say it's empowering in person at its highest level, where you said that about a person who doesn't feel like lifting, and then eventually they have the best session of their life. I've been there, done that with clients. I can relate to that. I remember one of the most poignant moments being a personal trainer was when a branch manager of a fancy ass bank in Toronto, dude is done up, Dapper Dan, Gucci all day, hair coiffed perfectly. Like this guy's just the Bay Street style. And he confessed very openly to me when we started training. He said basically he just wanted his wife to look at him the way that she used to look at him before he gained all that weight. This is someone who was, one of the movers and shakers in Toronto here, high up in a good financial position, wore like $1,000 suits, all that stuff. And the change that took place when he lost, I think it was 30 pounds. He wasn't, what we describe as very overweight, but overweight enough where he was self-conscious about it, and he felt that decline in himself and how he regarded himself and how others, most importantly, those that he cherished, regarded him. And that transformative change that occurred within him of a renewal, where then he started he picked up tennis again afterwards and all these other things. It was a cascading effect, and you could be almost a catalyst for that. That I think, I wouldn't say it's impossible. It's entirely possible to do it online, being an online trainer. It happens all the time. But you just reading people, as humans obviously have evolved, we're social creatures, where you see like the nonverbal signals, where you can see what's going on, where you have that intake form, Eric. I'm sure you have stories just like that. We have the intake form, and it takes some of that information. Like this guy, let's call him Bob. Like, Bob, what do you want to do? I want to lose 20 pounds. Like, okay, that's objectively like what you want to do. Why do you want to lose it? To feel better about myself. And you could get to that, again, in an online conversation. Is it Skype? You could do it. But people, the trust for that vulnerability, I think especially for men, I'll just say quickly, I think kind of in person, where they feel safer perhaps than through like an online intake form. Some of those frank conversations, I've had more emotionally honest conversations in person being a personal trainer for 6-7 years than I probably have had online when I did online training. Now there's the scope, total amount of hours, and all those other things. But I think also there is just something that is missing for those that haven't experienced it, that would make you a more empathetic person, which makes you ultimately a better trainer. Something we're talking about just real quick to pass the mic over to Eric. We're talking about, man, with Ben House, Dr. Ben House and Gabriel Fundero, that I think is kind of missing in the fitness space is that empathy and compassion and listening to other people, as opposed to, as you said, Chad, on social media, it's a pecking order. Like, look what I can do. I'm trying to impress other trainers, as opposed to how can I service my client better? And we all go, I think, as trainers, when you're an in-person trainer, you go through that. You want to show off, like we call the bells and whistles, where you see the trainers. I'm just going to say it out loud. To me, it was very gimmicky, not CrossFit, but the people that adopted CrossFit back in 2008, because there's another bell and whistle to kind of entertain people in the gym where no one else knows what's going on. They're throwing cards down in the middle of the gym floor. They're photographing it. They're laughing. They're creating a scene, a spectacle, a sense of kind of like a circus, a carnival of what's going on. And so they're really trying to sell the show, the spectacle, as opposed to get down to the brass tacks. How can I be a better trainer? So I absolutely think there's a lot missing for those that are unaware of what they're missing by not participating in some in-person personal training.
Omar, I think you said that really well. And one thing I will say about being an in-person personal trainer for a full-time, long-term extended career is that it takes a certain type of person. And it's not a good, bad thing. I don't want this to sound moralistic, because obviously I'm not a still full-time personal trainer. So I'm not saying and I'm a shitty person. I am a shitty person, but not for this reason.
For other reasons.
So exactly. I, like Omar, I was a personal trainer for about 7 years. And one thing I realized was that to make the steady income necessary of training, 20 plus sessions a week, depending on what area you're in and what kind of expenses you maintain, I guess is the way you'd put it. I just did not have, even doing it right, actually, especially doing it right, I didn't have the right personality for it, to be emotionally present, there, available to someone, and on, quote unquote. You think you're an extrovert. You don't really know until you try to be a personal trainer and you're clocking, 30-minute sessions. I'll say, actually, it's kind of harder because then you got to get right to it. But if you're clocking the standard 45 to 1 minute, 45 to 1 hour session, 5 days a week for 4 or 5 sessions per day, and you are actually doing what we're talking about, it takes a lot. And for some people, they do it, they get juiced up, and every client that they have a good session with makes the next one better. But for others, each one needs a little bit of recovery time. And I found I was actually the latter. And I knew that this wasn't something I could make at least my primary income. So, Chad, I want to ask you, because you've also been in a position as a manager and now as a gym owner. There's a lot of people in the personal training industry who are personal trainers, but maybe this isn't going to be the final point in their career, or you can see it in them. Like, how do you have that conversation, or how do you deal with that, the personal trainer burnout, or prevent it, or maybe help people find a better pathway forward?
I've been in somewhat of a cocoon, I would say, because of the 19 years having my own place, and it's obviously as a facility, it's a reflection of me. So I don't tend to attract people that are too dissimilar from me, or if I have, I got rid of them just because they were shitty people or shitty trainers or both. So the people that are with me now, I've known for 10, 15, 20, 25 years even. So it's a little bit different. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if you can't do it, this week, I think I'll have 30 sessions, and that's typical. I could have busy weeks where more people are in town and it's 40 sessions, but that's one-on-one 60-minute sessions. And I've been doing it for almost 30 years. So I have zero complaints. I'm not burnt out. I've never felt burnt out on training people. I like it just as much today as I did then. Now, part of that, I think, stems from the fact that when I was starting out, I couldn't just pick and choose who I trained. And I couldn't just train people that filled me up. I could have to take on somebody who was like, oh my God, I just wish they would cancel because I don't want to go in and see them at 5 o'clock at night, that kind of thing. But I don't have anybody like that now, so I'm sure that colors it a little bit and makes it somewhat easier for me. The other thing that makes it easier for me is I'm a pretty positive and easygoing person by nature. And so I don't tend to stress, and I don't know, I'm the right personality type. My client who'd been with me for 25 years, I asked her one time, what is it about, our time together, if you will, that why does she like coming in? It's 25 years. She could have started working out on her own at any point. She knew what to do. And she's like, well, you're always happy to see me. You never seem to be having a bad day. And I know I'm going to be taken care of. I don't have to think, she can just show up and she's going to get a good workout. I'm not going to hurt her. And no matter what she's going through, I'm going to put her first. I'm going to take care of her. And I can't tell you how many young trainers I've seen over the years. The session is all about them and what they're going through. And, oh, my girlfriend dumped me, or, oh, I don't have money to pay the power bill this week, or, it's all this stuff that makes you seem like a kid and like not a professional. And so even when I was going through those things, because I did, believe me, I've lived hand to mouth as a trainer. We all do starting out. I didn't share that with the people, that they didn't come there to hear my woes as a young guy trying to figure it out. They came for a good workout, and some of them, it wasn't even about the workout. It was just somebody to spend time with where they were the focus of that time, because maybe they weren't getting that at work or at home, and they got that from spending time with me. I used to be, when I was younger, I would say much more judgmental about the results physically that clients would get. And oh man, if they didn't get good results physically, maybe they wouldn't change their diet or whatever. And I didn't even want them to like claim me as their trainer. I thought it reflected bad on me because I couldn't get them in shape. And once you realize, you know what, you can only do so much, and it's up to them. And if they're having a good time and they're happy in spite of the fact that they're not getting the results that they said they wanted when they first came to you, because everybody says they want to, get a six pack or get stronger or whatever it is. But most of the time, it's really not about that. They just want to feel better about themselves in some way and be happy. And it's usually not by getting a six pack. So we both know that usually makes you feel more miserable trying to get a six pack. It's like, no, I don't think so. But they do like coming in and doing something better than they could before. And especially people who maybe they used to be picked last in PE. Maybe they've never had a good relationship to their body and never felt like they were in control of that. Maybe they've been bullied. Maybe they've never had that sense of I can handle a situation and diffuse something or go with an escalation if I have to. And so by coming in and getting stronger and more fit and more capable, it gives them that feeling of, I can handle life now. Because here's this thing that I thought was impossible that now I can do. And so that's one of the reasons why I actually like powerlifting. And I like it, even though I think it's been maybe skewed too much towards, how much can the average client deadlift, in recent years. But in general, I like the idea of powerlifting because it sets a exact goal for somebody. They have to put their butt on the line and try. And if they fail, they fail. It's not a big deal. But I do like that because I think it gives people a structure, and it's really simple to say, well, last meet I deadlifted 150 pounds. This meet I did 175. It's real easy to conceptualize, it's just right there in black and white, where so many other things in life are nebulous. You wait for your annual review at your job, and what are they going to say? And well, how do you quantify that? I don't know what to do, what to change, how to get better. But in the gym, I know how to get better. Either I lifted more or I didn't. It's really simple. And so, again, this points to the gym as a microcosm for life for me. So I think if you can handle that in the gym, and it's why online stuff, most people, when they train people online, are not doing like a virtual one-on-one session where you're coaching them. I did do some of that during COVID because my clients wanted me to. And so I was able to do that very easily because I have the same cues, the same rapport. We talk the same amount between sets, but most people aren't doing that. They're providing programming, not real live coaching. And so the benefit of the real live coaching, whether it's on camera or especially in person, is, like I said earlier, that time between sets. It's that time finding out that, my dad never thought I could do this, or, this girl dumped me and went with this guy, and it's because he, looked like that, or whatever. You find out the real root of what's bringing somebody into the gym. And if you can find that out, then it makes your job so much easier, because you're like, okay, this person just needs to feel a certain way. Well, you know what? I think this improvement that they're desiring to feel, I think maybe one of the power lifts might actually work with them for that. Or somebody else, you're like, you know what? They need some different type of structure. Maybe we need to start doing some interval training and watching their heart rate and seeing that they can push themselves in a certain way, or whatever it is. It's hard to give any hard and fast rule because everybody is different. Every situation is different, but it's just one of those things that you just learn over time doing stuff. And so you just kind of know what to do with most people when situations arise. And so I think that's where I'm a better trainer than I've ever been. And I'm going to be 53 in 12 days. And so I think that when I was 30, people, before I even opened up my own gym, people were like, well, are you still going to be training people when you're 50? I mean, how can you do that? Who's going to want to hire a 50-year-old trainer? I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm better now than I've ever been, and I'm only going to keep getting better. And it's all that stuff, especially in between the sets, that we need to talk about, where now I've got so much experience and so much wisdom and guidance to share. I have so many teenage clients that come to see me because, I can still be cool with them, but I'm also I'm not their parent. So I can give them advice that sticks that maybe if a parent gave them, it wouldn't, because I'm still cool and I can lift more than them, and whatever else. So they're like, oh man, this dude's like the real deal, So it works, and obviously it works for all ages. Like Eric talked about earlier, I had a client started training with me when she was 87. So I trained her daughters and her son-in-law, and they came to me. She turned 87. They're like, Mom's starting to slow down a little bit. We think she'd benefit from training. And I trained her all the way up until she was 95, until she passed away. And I saw her continue to get stronger, even into her 90s. And one of the things that I always talked about is I want you to be able to go to any public restroom and not get stuck on the toilet. Because there's some public restrooms out there in the middle of nowhere you might be traveling that are really, really low. And I don't want you to have that. I wouldn't say all these words to them. I wouldn't talk about being embarrassed. But my feeling for them is if they were like my grandparent. I wouldn't want my grandma to have been stuck on the toilet in the middle of somewhere and have to call for help. I don't want them to have to do that. And that's, to me, what it can be about. It just depends on the client. If you've got an 85, 90-year-old client, it's about not getting stuck on the toilet. If you've got a 19-year-old client who's an actor, it might be actually about getting a six-pack for that next role. But the vast majority of people, it's somewhere in between six-pack and not getting stuck on the toilet.
Eric, I do want Chad to rewind for a moment, because I do think there's something very powerful for either aspiring personal trainers or current personal trainers to digest. Real quick before I go on, because I have a question for Eric, and then I think Chad will also be able to provide some insight. My heuristic for evaluating a personal trainer is essentially this: the less you talk about yourself, the more likelihood you're a better personal trainer. Those that divulge or keep it all about them, and it actually is really cringy in my opinion, where they want to talk to their client about themselves, like lay out their problems, is just my neat, easy heuristic. Like, how good are you of a trainer? You're terrible, because you're making the session about yourself because you're bored, and you perpetually want, therefore, to reflect the conversation back to you because you don't find what they're talking about interesting, even though what they're talking about is very, very, very likely related to their actual goal. It might seem tangential, like they're talking like, oh, my day at work. It's like, but they're talking about kind of their emotional well-being and all these things. And there's too many shitty trainers. But my question to Eric, because my question for you, man, do you think your time spent being a trainer, it was that you hadn't arrived at the time or place? And I do think time and place, that's the nugget I think I took from Chad's story about where you're in the Midwest, not deriving enough money. You got to go somewhere else. Las Vegas, you got to go basically eventually to, LA, where you could derive an income, procure the clients that then are in simpatico with you, so you gel and you don't feel kind of that emotional burden. Do you think that was a factor for you? Because I do think for a lot of trainers that could be the case. I experienced that myself when I was first starting off, big box gym, and there was what I would regard now definitely as some morally reprehensible business practices that slowly eroded just my overall enjoyment of the process, where they would upsell to people that financially couldn't actually pay for these things. The language that they used and the way that they referred to clients or different tiers of people just like really, really disenfranchised me. And then eventually when I went over to another place and I went to a facility, basically that's my question for you, Eric, man, that payment wasn't an issue. So it wasn't this like really seedy, gross conversation. I think personal trainers, unfortunately, especially when they start off, they're trying to, support themselves, and maybe their clientele aren't necessarily in a position to afford some of the services they're offering. So there's just this like mismatch going on. And then in addition to that, after that is you eventually percolate up. It took me like 2 years to have a client roster that for me, I wouldn't feel emotionally drained during some because people are going through different things, but it's like if someone fundamentally doesn't enjoy training, we could get you to that point where maybe it's part of your life. It's a process. But if someone comes to you, it's like, oh, I was referred to you because like I have like my friend, like she trains with you, man, getting stronger, all these other things, that I have these goals in mind. It seems like you'd be perfect. Boom. From the word jump, the investment that you put in, you're going to be getting it back. So you kind of have that moral reciprocity. For you, Eric, just for where you were, because I know me being in Toronto, it's like in New York City, it's like in LA, you can reach that point. I do question for a lot of people out there, and that's why I don't think it's any shade whatsoever or shame. also developing into being an online trainer. I don't know if that's the case. If you basically can find your clientele, let's say you're like Des Moines, Iowa, that would not mirror you, but be able to sustain different personality types and different types of training and niches. So I'm just curious, man, with yourself, it would be Sacramento. Like I assume it'd be hard. Do you think that's part of the process for you and like what some trainers go through? And then I want to hear from Chad.
Great question and good framing too. And one thing I would say is on the topic of making it about you in a session, and that being a gauge of a good trainer or a bad trainer, really in this case, I will say there is a specific purpose for sharing things about yourself. And it is not something you would just necessarily do automatically, but something you use as a tool to build rapport. Because obviously, if you're a trainer and your client knows nothing about you and you're very, very close to the chest about your personal life, that's not a very comfortable space for you to therefore share stuff about your personal life.
Yeah.
But I think there's a big difference between what Chad was talking about basically complaining about all the shit that makes you look like a child, and taking up airspace just because you need someone to pay attention to you while you're crying in the corner, and using your personal training hour for that. And the person's like, sweet, thanks for spotting me, I guess, versus going, I've had a really tough time getting this client to open up. Maybe I should share some things where I think we might relate, to give them the opportunity and the space to do the same. So I'd say use it like a tool is one thing I would add to that. To answer your question, Omar, Sacramento is a moderate sized city, and it's, I don't think I ever had a logistical barrier in terms of the cost of living and the amount of income you can derive from personal training. More so for me, and yes, I did get exposed to a number of things that made me just go, gross, I don't want to be part of that. Like the first personal training, that's not true. The first personal training job in California that I sat down for, because I first started working at the YMCA in Augusta, Georgia, right after I got out of the Air Force, but while my wife is still in before we moved back to California. So that was where I first cut my chops for like 6 months as a trainer at the Y. Came back, interviewed for a spot at 24 Hour Fitness, and this is in 2006 or 7. I can't quite remember which. And the personal training sales manager who sat down was very obviously, who interviewed me, a sales manager. Had a background in sales, not at all in training. And all they were talking about was how if I got more certifications, and these are the list, I would get more pay. If I re-sign clients, here's the cut I would get and the re-sign packages we should do. And if I get the clients to buy the supplements, because they had like the supplement brand at 24 Hour Fitness, this is back when they had like the Body Bug as well, and you try to upsell those. Basically showed me all the different upsells that I could get commission on this stuff. And my whole, like, it was just like this big blaring horn in my mind, like conflict of interest, unethical, don't want. And he's like, you've got a good certification, military experience. You're a little older than the average trainer who has the amount of experience you have. I think you're going to do great. You're smart, awesome. So let's have you back for a second interview. But honestly, we could hire you pretty soon. And I was like, great. Yeah, I'll call you. And then I did some in-home personal training with a company that actually, again, another terrible experience, ended up, it was National Home Trainers at the time, which went defunct and never paid me for the last like 3 months of work that I did. But I finished out all the sessions with my clients because they had paid for it up front, so that's the way the model works. They pay centrally. They go, hey, here's someone within a 30-mile radius of you, go out to their home and train them. And then once you log the session, they pay you. But the clients had purchased their packages up front and there's no central office to pay me. So I essentially worked there for a couple months without getting paid. So another terrible experience. And then where I finally landed was a personal training studio called Fitness Together, which could be very good, but depended on who was the current owner. And we had like 3 owners change over in a 3-year period. And that was because, again, now we're getting into where the financial collapse happened from, 2007, 8, and 9. And I worked there from late 07 till early 2010. And then I started 3DMJ and changed. So I'd say even if I'd had no depression, I hadn't had that experience at 24 Hour Fitness, hadn't gotten burned by National Home Trainers, I think I would have transitioned to online coaching for 2 reasons. One, Well, actually, they're kind of one and the same reason. Ultimately, I loved bodybuilding and strength sport, and I wanted to coach that. So I essentially wanted to be a sports coach. But very early on, I realized that everything that Chad's been talking about, personal training is about building relationships and helping people discover what really fills their cup internally and help them move forward and become, the best version of themselves, and that it is all a microcosm for that. And that happens in sport as well, of course. So eventually I kind of, I don't know, you can call it like the John Wooden style of coaching, like making people better humans through their sport. And there's a lot of opportunity to do that in weight class restricted sport and bodybuilding, where it can go very bad, which is true of fitness as well. There's a lot of crap out there. But anyway, ultimately I found that yes, all the things we're talking about personal training, I enjoy, but I can't handle that kind of constant time restricted pressure in person as a non-strong extrovert like Chad and other successful long-time in-person personal trainers. I could probably maintain 20 sessions a week, I think, and be good to go, but that wasn't quite enough to really live off of. And ultimately I got more enjoyment out of working with bodybuilders, and it's like you can't have a bodybuilding gym full of like athletes who come in. So the only option really is online. So that's kind of what led to 3DMJ, partially logistical, but mostly just because I really realized what I wanted to do.
Chad, let me ask you a question now, because for me, the moment, Eric, from what you shared, it was the financial instability that I actually experienced. It'd be in 2011, where I got very sick. Nothing, close to death, but unable to work for at least 3 weeks. And right then, because I had not planned this out, I'm like 20, whatever, like in my early 20s. And all of a sudden, I can't work for 3 weeks. I'm used to the steady, like, you train it was like 40 or 50 hours a week. Cool. That's erased. I had saved up a little bit, but that instability actually frightened me. And it was a conversation with one of my clients, a very smart guy, Mr. CEO, 10K a day, that said, you're trading dollars for hours. When I came back, and he said eventually, like, there is that theoretical ceiling, is that you could go through it a few different ways, like here, like ultimately, what do you want? And it did set me down a path where that 3 weeks really made me feel like, oh man, like if that was to happen again, because that came out of nowhere, what would I do? And then the longevity question. So I think my question for you, Chad, is that I don't think it's an accident you are where you are, the success that you've garnered over time. But what are then some of the considerations, because Eric shared from himself, like some of his journey being a personal trainer, his dynamic, his relationships, what he wanted. For you, what are maybe some of those struggles that you went through where you said, as an example, like COVID is a perfect, neat encapsulation of a lot of different things, right? Because you're a personal trainer. For a lot of personal trainers, man, that's like a death knell right there, right? You switch to online, you try and do the online. It's going to be tough, because I think people in person often rely on that in-person training.
For sure.
So what are some of those struggles you went through, or part of this journey? Because we have that story, and I do eventually want to get back to that physical culture, like the 80s and a lot of the things we're talking about before we started the podcast, but maybe from a relatability standpoint, or also just like being in this space for now over 30 years, some of the issues that you dealt with, and some of the mechanisms that you used in order to figure out solutions.
Sure. Well, the number one is, you guys both touched on it, is financial. It is a difficult business. Typically, you're either going to be, and unless you work for a big box and you're an employee, you're going to be an independent contractor, or you're going to be self-employed, working on your own. Maybe you're doing in-homes, or working at a private studio paying rent, or whatever it is. And most people do better as an employee, because they're not used to saving money for taxes and all that kind of stuff. And so what I've seen so often is a guy working at a big box gym, and he's making, let's say he's getting $30 out of the cut, and of course taxes and everything are taken out of that $30. And so he's walking out of there with, $18 an hour take home. And he sees, hey, if I go out on my own, I'm going to make the whole thing. This is going to be great. But they don't plan for all the stuff that the employer was paying, because it's not just what the employer takes out of your pay, but also the employer's portion. And when you're self-employed, you're both the employer and the employee. So you have to pay self-employment tax. So yes, you can definitely make more. You're making 100%, but you got to actually pay more into tax on your side, on your employer side, than not. And most people they don't even think about shit like that. They don't think about starting a 401k for themselves, an I-401k or a SEP IRA or all that kind of stuff. And they don't think about, like Omar said, 3 weeks did him in, basically. 3 weeks shouldn't do anybody in, no matter what their job is. We should have call it a rainy day fund, an emergency fund.
Cocaine
whatever.
was not cheap back then. Let me just say it. Like, it's the market fluctuations post-recession, guys, is wild.
Well, especially not in Canada, because
you got to import it all the way. Yeah.
So yeah, the biggest thing is finance. That's why, I don't know if you guys know, James Krieger and I over COVID started Fit Pro Financial. It's basically a financial education website for personal trainers, or anybody really in fitness, and not because the information is any different than for anybody else, but we just tend to talk the same language as trainers and coaches and that kind of thing. But basically, it is that it's knowing how to pay yourself first, and it should start with the very first client. You need to get used to it. So somebody Venmos you $100 for a session, then you know what? Take 30 out of that 100, put it in a separate savings account, and that's for taxes. Just put it in there. Don't even think about that you have it. You can't touch it. And then you got to make everything happen with that other $70 and do that for every single payment, Venmo, check, cash, whatever it is. Just get used to doing that from the jump. And then eventually you'll start to be able to see what you can make and what your actual take home is. You're not going to have to worry about at the end of the year having this massive tax bill because you didn't pay your quarterly taxes like you were supposed to. So you've got not only a massive tax bill, but a penalty for not paying quarterly. And then you just keep chasing your tail each year like that. Because now all of a sudden you got to pay last year's taxes, but your first quarter for next year is due on the same date, April 15th. And you're like, well, I don't have the money for both because you haven't been saving it all the way along. And so it's really hard if you don't start from the jump with that mindset. And so that, I think, for most people going from employee to self-employed, or maybe they're starting out as self-employed and have never ever thought about taxes before. That's the biggest thing, for me, is I think being able to both pay your taxes and to start actually saving for stuff. I think if you guys are familiar with Ally Bank, it's an online bank. They have a really cool thing within one savings account. So instead of having to have multiple savings account, you can create what they call buckets. And so you can have a tax bucket, down payment on a house bucket, college fund for the kids bucket, whatever it is. And so you can start having this mindset of every time money comes in, I'm going to portion it up in whatever percentage you want, whatever you think fits what you've got going on. And that way you can see, okay, I've all of a sudden started to build up thousands of dollars in this account, and I've got hundreds of dollars in this account. And maybe that's in one account, all you want is the deductible for all your different insurances, whether it's health insurance, your car insurance, whatever. So you know what? Boom, I've got $3,500 saved. That covers all the deductibles from all the insurances I've got. So that one can stop. I can stop putting new money into that and start funding some of these other buckets. That's, I think, a great way to start because it's only one account. You don't have to have multiple accounts. Although there is a benefit, I think, to having accounts at different banks. So it's even that much harder. It's not as hard anymore with everything being online and virtual and click. You can transfer money pretty quickly. But there is still something about it being in two separate locations that makes you less likely to touch it than if it's, in the same account, especially just under a different bucket. But you got to know your own mindset best to do that. But that's the number one thing is handling that financial stuff. The other thing, what I did always think about, and I may not have thought about it necessarily in the emotionally intelligent way that I would now, but I did always think that I didn't want to have to always be scrambling for new clients. So every time I got a client, I wanted them to be a lifer. I wanted them to stick with me for as long as possible. And so it's not like there's all these different tricks that I can do. There's only so many exercises and so many apparatus and whatever. So I just better, take care of them and be somebody that they would want to hang out with for 2 to 3 hours a week. And if I can be that type of a person, and I know how to train them both, because a lot of trainers are great with the nuts and bolts of training, but nobody wants to hang out with them. They're a jerk. It's like, I can't tell you how many when I was at the commercial gyms, trainers wouldn't even be looking at their clients during the session. They'd either be checking themselves out in the mirror or checking some chick out or, whatever was going on. And it's like, well, why would I pay for that? It's ridiculous. So I think that, the cream usually rises to the top. Now, I have seen shitty trainers who had an incredible gift of gab and personality that were successful. And it used to really fry me until I realized, you can learn something from them. It may not be how to train people, but you can certainly learn personality and how to talk to people, how to make people feel good. I literally watched a trainer take somebody who had no business purchasing training and walk them down to the bank and get the cash out of the teller. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. How on earth did you? I would never have done it, something like that. But it was something that's like, that's a pretty remarkable skill set to have, as long as you can use your powers for good. So, for me, it's longevity is repeat business. And so that's why I say I like to measure, my clients in decades. And it doesn't mean that I don't take on new clients. I do. But when I take on new clients, I also take them on typically at much higher rates. So if you want to fit on my schedule, I have very few openings on my schedule. It's going to cost you. And then as people fall off, because eventually they will, whether they pass away or move or have some kind of financial thing, then those people that may have been at a lower rate, because they've been with me for so long, they get replaced by somebody at a higher rate. So that's how I end up making, more money over time without necessarily having to train more people. Because as people at lower rates fall off, people at higher rates come on. But then the biggest thing is obviously having a facility is I can have other trainers there. And so I can make a portion of that, because it is really difficult if you're just a single trainer on your own and with no other revenue stream. So yes, if you have the ability to, whether it's sell physical or intellectual products online, or have somebody else work for under you, or that type of thing, you almost definitely have to have that. Certainly in LA, where rents are so exorbitantly high here that it's really unbelievable to me that I've been able to withstand that 2008, 2009 financial crisis and COVID. It's like I got no business as a gym still being around after those things. It's like unbelievable. But all that was because when I started in 2002, 2003, I did everything right. So I was able to withstand the 30% retraction that 2008 and 9 brought on, and I was able to withstand 100% retraction that COVID brought on. But that's because I was able to get a disaster loan. Well, I was able to get a disaster loan because I had good credit. And I had good credit because I did everything right for, the 18 years prior. So you always have to have that long term in mind. And as trainers, we are always playing like 3-card Monty with our finances and robbing Peter to pay Paul. And, okay. And I used to do this myself. So I'm, this in the old days, you could, this credit card, you might have to have 2 or 3 times in a row of being late before they would actually charge you a late fee. Now they're charging it to you like the hour you're overdue. It's like you're getting charged. But in the old days, so you used to be able to say, well, you know what, I can not pay this one this much because I'm not going to get paid a late fee or charged a late fee, and I'm going to pay this credit card instead. And then you would just keep doing that, and like I say, it was literally a shell game. And that is a horrible feeling. And I hated feeling like that. And the number of times I thought, I should just quit and become a firefighter. That's was the de facto thing. Now with COVID, what I've seen, at least on my social media feed, is tons of trainers who are now selling houses. I can't tell you how many I've seen that. There are so many that's like, wait, they were a trainer when I met them, when I spoke at this event. Now they're, selling houses. So, and more power to them. I hope they're, able to pay their bills and stuff. But it's that.
Well, if there's anything that 2008 taught us, is that the housing market is impenetrable and it'll always be great. So,
right.
We did learn, Chad, real quick. Eric and myself were trying to figure out the name for the 3-card shuffle, and it's 3-card Monty.
Yep. It took us a while to get it, but we got it right on camera. And now you've confirmed that we did in fact name the game correctly. So
I will say the financial advice that you gave sounds fantastic. I do want to run you by what I heard from the same dude at the gym that shows every single one of his personal training clients the next person he plans on, fornicating with. And that is that, and that's not an exaggeration. And it's not, when you're the alpha dog in the gym, that's just what you do. Okay. But his neat financial plan is to then sell his clients steroids, get some of those clients to become personal trainers. This is not an exaggeration. Have them basically become his mules and thereby create a steroid empire. And because it's cash, we know cash is king. You don't have to declare that shit. So that is but one avenue to go down. What you said about financial literacy and education, which sounds like, the straight and narrow path, but
what could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
I mean, we're just giving the people of the cult options and different successful business plans.
You got to have a revenue stream, and if that stream is full of Anavar or whatever, that's just what happens.
I don't see anything wrong with the personal training Anavar pyramid scheme that he proposed that somehow starts with showing a picture on your phone of someone you're trying to have sex with to them. But you need an entry point or a conversation starter at any point. So at least philosophically, I can agree with that, if not maybe necessarily in the content.
Yeah.
Omar.
Well, he's socially humiliating them, Eric, by a certain authority that he, in fact, has a vibrant sex life, clearly, which is the thing that they're in many ways lacking. And so if only they look like him, they would probably procure the same high frequency of willing participants.
So it's an upsell. It's a neg to I don't look good enough to have sex. Don't worry, I have a solution for you, and it's anabolic steroids. Now you look great. You know what you should do? Be a trainer. And they're like, oh, cool. Well, do I need to learn about resistance training or nutrition? No. Would you like to sell these steroids too? One leads to the other. I think it's actually quite perfect.
Easy money, bro.
So I guess we just gave you a master class. The intro was what Chad advised, stuff about, taxes, long-term planning, all that stuff. But absolutely, we gave you the faster pathway through Omar's experience. No, but in all seriousness, those are some very pragmatic, straightforward, and simple pieces of advice you've given. And I think it also goes to show that it's not just the necessity of being in the right place where personal training can thrive, having the appropriate personality to where you won't get burnt out. It also shows just how intentional you need to be to make personal training a lifelong career. And that even if you do stay, like yourself, Chad, as someone who is still training people, every day of the week, or at least every weekday, and that's still a major part of your income, there are still methods in place to make sure that you are being more efficient in your income. Having, trainers under you who pay rent, and also doing things like scaling up your prices relative to inflation over time, especially if you have these repeat long-term customers. So when they drop off, your income scales with it. I think those are really intelligent things. And also saving and all that great stuff, and making sure you have the rainy day /recession / global pandemic fund. So I think that's all fantastic advice. One thing I do want to ask you about, now that we've been talking about how you've been a strategic planner and long-term thinker in your fitness career, is just in my short time being in the fitness industry for between 15 and 20 years, I have seen these cyclical patterns emerge. And I've noticed that some younger trainers can't differentiate between what might be a fad versus what might actually be something that they should pay attention to. Oh, goodness. The YouTube followers are having a treat right now. If you're just listening on podcast, you're missing out on Jake. So unfortunately for those, again, another reason to watch us on YouTube, but I'll continue. It's difficult to differentiate between what's going to stick around and what is just a fad. I'm sure you've seen the cyclical nature been lifting since far more than 3 decades, but actually been working in the industry for 3 decades. How do you tell, or what advice can you give to young trainers who aren't sure exactly what's going to be sticking around versus what's not?
Well, because I've been around for so long, So I started out at a powerlifting gym back before I knew what steroids were, whatever, before they were illegal. Everybody in that gym was on it. I didn't know. I just thought, man, these people are huge, especially the women. I was like, oh my God, and it was a small hole in the wall place in Galesburg, Illinois. And, they were doing the basics. They weren't doing a whole lot more than the big three and, a few accessory lifts. And over time in being in the gym business, and I started to see, step aerobics, and that became a thing. And then all of a sudden I came to LA, and the gym I worked at was right across the street from Billy Blank's first studio, and Ty Bo blew up. And then all of a sudden he's got the videos on every hour of the day and night, and everything's all about Ty Bo. And then it was curves, and for a shorter time than curves, it was cuts, which was the male version of curves. And then, of course, CrossFit, which is still obviously hanging around. There's actually some good points to CrossFit. I won't go into the good and the bad, but it still, to me, is another fad-ish trend. Then it's evolved into more Orange Theory, F45 type stuff. And then, of course, you still have your typical, big box gyms, and more recently, more stuff like the at-home, higher-end stuff like Peloton and Tonal and that kind of thing. But when it comes down to getting actual results, you don't need a whole lot more than, a set of free weights and a bench, or hell, even a Swiss ball if it's anti-burst and you can do some stuff on it. I mean, you don't need a whole hell of a lot. And if I look at pictures of, Eugene Sandow from 1900, he doesn't look much different than any natural bodybuilder right now would look, in contest shape. He looked phenomenal. He didn't have any crazy machines or anything around. So, to me, it's like, well, what is getting in the way of people's success? Is it that they don't have a trainer that has enough certifications? That they don't have enough equipment? Or is it that they're not being consistent because they don't enjoy the process? And so I think it's consistency and enjoying the process is the big thing. And that really shouldn't matter what apparatus you have available to you to accomplish. Whether you're working out on your own at home or at a gym with a personal trainer, it shouldn't matter. I should be able to get results from somebody, whether they've got just a set of bands, whether they've got free weights, whether they've got calibrated Olympic plates, whatever it is. I should be able to get them results, and at the very least be able to get them to enjoy the process of training. And then maybe they come to the realization, hey, you know what? I've kind of tapped out what I feel like I can accomplish with these bands. I want to buy something else for my home gym. What do you recommend? Or you know what? I think I've really done what I can do at my home gym. I want to come see you at the gym. How many days a week should I come see you? That kind of thing. But I think that we tend to always be doing this kind of song and dance. I think it's imposter syndrome. A lot of it, trainers don't feel like professionals and don't feel like the basics are good enough. And they don't have a good gift of gab like Jake. So they, don't know how to keep people entertained for an hour or whatever. I mean, I have, friends of mine who are trainers that talk to me about that. And it's like, they don't even want more clients. Like, they don't have as many clients as I do. And they don't even want more because they don't know how they're they just don't have the thing like Eric was talking about. 20 hours tapped him out, and if that's your personality, then maybe training's not for you, or maybe it's not as a full-time gig. Maybe it's something that you do as your side hustle because you do like it in certain doses. But if you're going to do it as a career, and I'm one of probably the few people who can say they've been personal training for close to 30 years, you got to like people, and you got to like going to the gym, and you got to like having some clients at 8 a.m. and some at 6 p.m. because it's just not going to line up consistently. You might be able for a while to say, okay, I'm going to take clients from 8 a.m. to noon, and I'm going to be done, and the rest of my day is mine. But what happens when that person gets referred to you and they can only come after work? And then all of a sudden you lose your 10 a.m. and you've got nobody to fill it. It's shit is going to happen, and it's going to get in the way. So you've got to be willing to be malleable. Now, I do take, Saturday afternoons and Sundays off, but I'm still working 6 days a week. But I can also take vacations whenever I want and that kind of thing too. So I'm not, a slave to the grind 52 weeks a year. But you've got to really, really love it. And like I said earlier, me being in it for as long as I have been and still training 30 to 40 sessions a week. And I love it. I hated COVID and not being able to go into the gym and see my clients and see the other trainers and being able to just hang out, because I create a good, fun environment. I mean, if you go into my gym right now, you can find where my Nerf guns are hidden. And, one of the things I'll do all the time with new clients, and they'll come in the door and I hand them a single shot little Nerf gun and lock the door, and they're looking at it like, what the hell is this? And then I grab my Nerf machine gun and I just start blasting them with 70 shots,
Amazing.
So, I mean, you make it fun for people. It's like, oh, this is different. Nobody gives a fuck about the Krebs cycle. Nobody. I don't even give a crap about it. It's like, big deal. Your clients certainly don't care about it. They don't care about sarcomeres and Z lines and all this kind of stuff. It's good that we know this stuff, but the clients don't care about it. And a lot of trainers, because all they care about is training, and they're so deep in the grass with it, that that's all they can talk about. And you need to be able to talk about anything but training with your clients. You need to be able to talk about that time that I went to Sweden or Switzerland or Japan or whatever. You need to be able to talk about, I read this book or I watched this documentary or whatever. It's about being interested in them and then an interesting person too. You got to bring something to the table other than personal training advice.
I think that's really, really good advice. And I think it's almost impossible to get that kind of life experience if you're one-dimensional, just about lifting, constantly strapped for cash, and, mired in your own BS as a kid, like you're talking about before. So I think all of it fits together. One thing I do think that's really cool, because you were talking about a number of things that can be done ethically or unethically, and that we should learn from it. And this links to things we've talked about on the podcast before, how, a lot of the people who put out really terrible advice online, we just get angry at them and we associate bad, with their information, it's objectively harmful, with anything they do. And we don't want to use their quote unquote marketing strategies. But honestly, when we look at successful science communicators of the modern age who are using social media in an effective way that's making the fitness space better and reducing that knowledge asymmetry, they've learned from those strategies, just like you learned from the trainers who have the gift of gab and nothing else. They know how to re-sign clients, and maybe they shouldn't be, but you're going to take what's useful and leave the rest. So I think that's awesome. One thing that you do that I've seen other people do poorly, and probably they're half lying about it, is the fact that you are operating in LA. You've been training there a long time, and probably because you just do a fantastic job, you've had the opportunity to work with some well-known people of notoriety, we shall say. But I respect the fact that you don't try to leverage that as a way to grow your profile. I think obviously you don't need to. They're coming to you because of your reputation. You're not using them to build your reputation. But I know a lot of trainers who see a famous client or a pro athlete, or even in a small niche area like, say, coaching bodybuilders or coaching powerlifters, a world champion or a national champion, as a meal ticket. And they are really bad at not just distastefully kind of claiming the success of their clients or putting their clients out there. Sometimes not even asking for permission. The things I've heard from just talking to high-level bodybuilders and powerlifters. So I know Billy Zabka, the Cobra Kai star, he's actually shared himself that he works with you, which I think is really cool. When I found that out, I was like, that's badass. I love Cobra Kai. It's such a great show. Talk to me a little bit about your philosophy and experiences working with folks in the entertainment industry who have a certain level of fame.
Sure. I mean, everybody is different, and it would probably raise my notoriety if the clients that I've had over the years, post about me on their social media or whatever. Whether or not it would actually lead to more customers actually coming in the door, I don't know. Maybe if I had an online product to sell, it would make a difference in people, clicking on it and buying it. Probably certainly would in an instance like that. But since I don't do that at the moment, I've been fortunate. Like I said, Billy in particular is one of the ones who has talked about me in interviews, and posted about me on his social media. So people are pretty aware that I train him. And that's great. But I haven't gotten a single new client who said, oh, I read this article that you coached Billy Zabka. I want to come train with you, because I'm in LA. So they've got to live in LA. B, they've got to be able to afford working out with me. So those people are probably going to come on direct referral anyway. They're probably going to be a friend of Billy's where he's like, oh man, you got to go train Chad, rather than something that they saw on social media. And I've trained so many people over the years, and you can really get your feelings hurt, I think, sometimes if people don't post about you or don't say something, or maybe because I've been mentioned in like liner notes of CDs or in the acknowledgments in books, and then I've been left out of stuff like that too. And you can start to feel like bad about yourself because you were left out or whatever. Why didn't they like what I did or whatever? And it's not about you. They've got so much shit going on. They didn't intentionally not think about you. It just happened. It's not a big deal. So it's hard sometimes to take your own ego out of the equation and realize that they wouldn't keep coming to you and keep seeing you if they weren't happy with what you were doing. So don't worry about any ancillary stuff. If somebody happens to post about you or happens to mention you in an interview, that's great. But if they don't, that's not why they came in anyway. They didn't come in looking for Chad so that they can post about him. They came in looking for Chad so that he can help them get in shape. And a lot of people, they don't even want people to know. I've had clients who've had stalkers, who've had issues with paparazzi. So they don't even want to know necessarily the public to know that they even live in LA, let alone that they're training at such and such gym with such and such guy. So you've got to respect that, because that's real stuff. I'm not ever worried about a stalker, but they are, so that's real. And so I'm not going to say it's not cool when somebody mentions you or gives you a shout out or posts a picture of you and them. It is cool. And it's cool to train famous people, and it's cool to see your work up on a big screen or on a billboard or whatever. But you can't, you got to let that be the icing on the cake and not the cake itself. And you got to be happy with the cake, And so once I got that through my head, and worried far less about, social media growth or anything like that. And you can look, I've got like 3,500 followers on Instagram. It's not like I try to, promote myself as some thing, that I'm not. So yeah, I don't know. It's just training a celeb. The only difference is they might have a deadline and there might be money riding on the line for them to get in a certain shape. But that's not necessarily any more pressure than coaching a bodybuilder who's got a deadline, or coaching a powerlifter who's got a meet coming up. You take both those type of clients, their goals very seriously. It's just maybe it doesn't have to be on a big screen with half their clothes taken off, But it's the same though kind of thing. You take their goals seriously no matter who the client is. So other than that, it's not a huge difference. I just happen to live in LA, and my gym is in an area where lots of rich and or famous people live. So it's conducive to them. But it's not like, I came out of the womb here in LA and people were like, oh, I got to go see Chad Landers. It's like, nobody knew who the hell I was. That just happens over time, over being somewhere. And, there's an attrition rate. Other people go away and you stick around and you do good work, and some people get referred to you.
Now, Eric, hold up here. Chad, I think we heard the golden nugget we seek, and that is to attain the proper notoriety and level of success that Iron Culture seeks for supremacy of the fitness space, the cultural sphere. We must use, in order to assert ourselves once again at the top of the pyramids, celebrities. So, Eric, I'm going to start with you because we all know there's someone claiming to be the Hollywood trainer and get the Hollywood physique. So Eric's going to name two people that he doesn't want to train, but he just wants to be associated with, that he wants people to think that Eric trains. We don't want to put in we don't want intense interpersonal relationships. Sounds like a lot of work. Being present, emotionally available, helping people achieve their goals, whatever. Eric's going to name 2 people. He's the Hollywood physique master. I'm going to name 2 people. I'm going to be the Bollywood physique master. So Eric, go ahead. Name 2 people.
I want to say Dwayne, our buddy.
Dwayne.
Yep. And then second will have to be... that's a tough one. I'm going to have to say Sylvester Stallone in that he's been able to stay in fantastic shape, all natural too, from what I've heard, for all of his last, like his whole last third of his career, despite the fact that, he's getting on up there in age.
Chad, so you hear we're going to need those connections. Now, for my connections, they might be a little bit harder to procure, but I do trust in your ability to source the appropriate people. The first would be Emilio Estevez, just because his brother Charlie Sheen is getting all the clout and notoriety. He was in Mighty Ducks. He did direct a film that people tend to forget 15 years ago that was solid. What happened to him? Well, I want to help him regain his notoriety as a means of us regaining ours. And then lastly, the second person would be Paulie Shore. I mean, again, what happened to Paulie Shore, Biodome. Like, people forget that there was this masterpiece released in 1994 where he was enclosed with his friend, the best Baldwin, Stephen Baldwin, inside a biodome for upwards of 6 months. And the hijinks, the shenanigans that ensued afterwards, timeless comedic classics like Abbott and Costello, Charlie Chaplin. You just go down the list. Go ahead, Eric.
I've got to say this for everyone who loves science. Go onto PubMed and just type in the biosphere experiment, and you will find out that there was actually a study that basically replicated biodome. It's on metabolic adaptation as well. You'll learn something, and you will find an interesting outcome of that study was that they set up basically a biodome to observe people living in an enclosed environment. But there was a problem. They couldn't have the growth of food at the rate, because it's supposed to be self-sustaining, needed to provide people sufficient food. So they were constantly under-eating. So we got to observe some metabolic adaptations of food scarcity in this biosphere experiment, which actually I think lasted 2 years.
So you heard it here,
facts.
folks. Paulie Shore directly is contributing to science, our well-being, our cultural landscape as we know it. So, Chad, no pressure whatsoever. Our friendship does depend upon this. I would say out of the 4, if we had to weight them, given Eric's scientific background, Paulie Shore probably would be at the top, the tippity top,
100%.
as we say. And we can focus on the other 3 afterwards. But anyways, you heard it here, folks, first. Paulie Shore, I actually feel really bad for him, I'll say very quickly, because he tried to do the career revival. Normally it goes well, guys. Like, normally they get, like, more play, more gigs, and he did that. And apparently his mom, I think, owned the Comedy Store. Like, he is connected in LA.
Sure.
Yeah, and he had the documentary that's supposed to go over his hardships, and nothing happened from there until he got trained by the cult.
Yeah, we're his ticket, really. The more I think about it,
who's meal ticket, right?
Are you sure he's not still in the biodome?
He got stuck in it.
That's possible. Maybe he's just dedicated his life to science. Yeah.
He was the one that actually conducted. Little do we know, he went right back to school at the tender age of 40. Sure.
That's the Billy Zabka movie. You remember
Which one?
Back to School? Rodney Dangerfield, Back to School, and Billy Zabka played his son.
Yes.
Triple Lindy.
Oh yeah, dude, that's a classic Dangerfield one. Yeah, I haven't seen that in a long time.
Oh. Well, let me ask you, maybe, Chad, then, as one of the serious final questions, because we are reminiscing, and we still are in the throes of our existential crises, so we need to be reminded of our vitality and virility, which I assume is also what a lot of training clients seek from their trainers. You started lifting in the 80s, my man, and you did say that, once again, it was more permissive back then because steroids weren't illegal. You have seen seismic shifts, right? You examined a few of the trends over the last 35 years.
Sure.
Comparative to the mid 80s when you started training, what are maybe aspects of gym culture that either have evolved or changed, pros and cons? So things that, like, I wish we could go back to this part, but this was actually really shitty. Like, people were like, just like outright body shaming in 1985, like, put that shirt back on. Like, someone takes their shirt off and they're just like, there's like a whip. Like, what are some of the things? Because I do have one brief thing I'll say about the training space. And I think this was another factor, Eric, I didn't mention. One of the other barriers for an independent trainer there's a lot of things obviously Chad has done right, is procuring a comfortable place to train your clients. It is usually cost prohibitive where there's not big box gyms rule everything around us. They don't want independent trainers, so you're not going to get a job there. Small local boutique places are likely to charge you more. They're also probably a little further out of the way from where, you get your clients from a big box gym. It's downtown. Now you find a boutique gym on the east end of town. Half of your clients don't want to go. So it actually really, it's not like, follow Chad, Eric, and Omar's advice, like be in it for the right reasons, get the clients, all that stuff, and then just simply find a place. Like finding a place can be tough. So I'm curious about the environment you've experienced over the last 35 years then, Chad, being inside gyms, the yim.
Sure. I've been in all different types of gyms. So like I mentioned, the first gym I ever worked out at was commercial gym. I, of course, started out working out in my basement, and that was probably, even though I was all by myself, that was probably, looking back, the most fun I ever had because everything was new and I wasn't jaded. Yeah, I didn't know when I'm looking in that, hardcore bodybuilding book that all those guys were on drugs. I had no idea about that. All I knew is they looked superhuman and I'm this, little guy and I'm going to try to, change things. There was no way, me coming out of like grade school, going into junior high, that I was going to end up being like captain of a football team by my senior year in high school. It just wasn't going to happen. But then all of a sudden, I started lifting weights in junior high and all the way through. And it's not like I got huge or anything, but, pound for pound, I was super strong by the time I was, on varsity. And I became a good enough player out of that. And then probably because of all the other attributes that I still have today that makes me a good trainer also made me a good, person to have as captain of the team. The ability to coach people, to, some people need a kick in the ass and some need a pat on the shoulder, and you need to be able to navigate that. And gym culture is similar to that. I've seen great gym culture. That hole in the wall powerlifting gym was such a unique experience for a first gym. It was small, it was dirty, but everybody was had the same goal. There was nobody that was in there that was like talking shit about anybody else or anything like that. It was a very much of a family, hardcore environment where everybody knew how hard what they were doing was. Like I say, it was mainly squat, bench, and deadlift, and the very first set of Nautilus equipment that there ever was. And that it is true that an original Nautilus pullover is still one of the best machines ever. Just throw that out there. So that was great. The gym that I managed in Champaign-Urbana, it was called the Body Firm at the time. That was good because it was a mom and pop big box gym. So it wasn't, that big, but it was a membership gym and it had, tanning beds and aerobic classes and stuff like that. But because Champaign-Urbana's, at that time was probably 100,000 people total, and a lot of that is college campus. And I was managing the place, and I'm in my 20s, so people knew who I was, and I'd get free tickets to this and that and the other. I was a big fish in a small pond at that point, and so that was fun, And again, the gym culture there was friendly and good. I would say it wasn't until I went to bigger cities where I started to see maybe gym culture that wasn't as good. Certainly in Vegas, you started to see some of that, in the commercial gyms, a phoniness, if you will, to maybe, certain stuff. It wasn't more that kind of one family in it together striving for a similar goal. It was more, oh, look at that asshole, what's he doing, and this kind of a thing that I didn't like. And I've had experiences, whether it was at a big box gym in Vegas or at a boutique studio here in LA before I had my own, where people were all about the upsell and all about churning. And I'd have one guy that owned a place I worked at, and he'd ask every single client every day, give me 3 names. Give me 3 names. He was hitting them up for 3 names of people he could cold call and try to get him to come in and train like every day. I'm like, this is not conducive. And don't talk to my clients, even though they were technically his clients. And I was, since I worked at his place, But I don't want you hitting up my client while I'm training them for 3 names of people they can refer. They're not here to be your referral machine. People will refer people to you if you're good. You don't have to, not there's anything wrong with asking for it, but it's in the way that you do it. And when it comes off smarmy and slick and phony, I don't like that. Probably the last commercial gym I was at was at a Gold's Gym. And that just devolved. That place from blown out speakers. So they're cranking up the music and the speakers are blown out. So it's not a good environment. People in there like rubbing baby oil all over themselves, leaving. It was dirty.
So you're saying pros, cons, blown out speakers, bad, baby oil, good.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was just like, it was a circus. It was an absolute circus. And so when you had like professional clients to do personal training, that was not the environment for them. It might have been fine for, the young guys who were in there, doing their thing, not putting their weights away and whatever. But for those of us trying to like make a living and have a professional type thing, it just was not the place. My clients were so happy when I opened up my studio after leaving, and they never told me how unhappy they were there. The only reason they were there was because I was there, and I was, the good qualities I had, I guess, overcame the badness of the environment. But it's something I certainly took note of. It's like, oh wow, and so that's one of the things I think that a lot of times trainers don't take advantage of is their own clients in terms of asking them for both positive and negative feedback. Well, what do you like about working out with me? What do you don't like? Because we don't want to hear anything negative. We don't want to hear, oh, well, actually, I don't like when you go and play this radio station, or I don't like when you do whatever, we don't want to hear any of that stuff. All we want to hear is good stuff. So since we don't want to take a chance on hearing anything bad, we don't ask anything at all. And we should be asking those questions and finding out. And maybe all you'll get is good feedback. But if you do just get good feedback, at least you'll know and say, oh, wow, this is what's working. I better keep doing this. I better not go away from this. This actually is important. And it might have just been kind of an accidental success, if you will, and you didn't even know why. But if you had asked, you found that out. And so I've been doing it for so long now. I just kept being exposed to so many different things that I was like, Bruce Lee in that regard. I would do away with the stuff that I thought didn't work and didn't like, and I would keep the stuff that I liked. And that goes for, shitty trainers with the gift of gab, or, gyms that have certain good qualities and certain bad qualities. And so I would try to do the best that I could to make as positive an environment as I could. I always said when I first opened my studio that I wanted a place that, whether they were a trainer or a client, that they couldn't imagine training anywhere else, because then I was going to be successful. And so no matter what I charged for rent or whatever it was, if it's like, well, clients love it here and they don't want to go to some other, shitty competitor when they could be going to this place, and so that's tended to have worked out, pretty well for me.
Be like water.
Be like Paulie Shore.
Who is like water, of course.
Who is like water.
Molds himself to whatever situation.
He's a chameleon, really.
True method
Absolutely.
actor. Yeah.
Yep.
You think he was an airhead 20-something-year-old. He was portraying one.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I think the last question I want to ask you, Chad, because I want to be cognizant of your time. We've had you on for a while now, and we greatly appreciate all your experience and expertise, is, so you've got a physical culture collection that dates back to, like you said, Sandow in the 1900s, probably some stuff even from the 1800s. What are some of the coolest pieces that you have in your collection, and what are some of the, maybe the biggest nuggets, or it doesn't even have to be necessarily nuggets or pearls of wisdom or light bulb moments that you've had from that, but what is some of the coolest stuff? Like if I came over to your house right now and you were like, Eric, you got to check this shit out, what would be like the top 3 on that list?
Obviously the oldest book that I have is How to Be Strong by William Blakey. I wrote an article in like 2012 on the PTDC about it. And that's from 1879. And basically what I said in that article a decade ago was from 1879 until now, nothing has changed. The stuff that he was talking about then same stuff we're talking about now, getting people motivated and to go into the gym, getting women to work out, you know, all this different kind of stuff. It was pretty amazing. And I've got so much of that stuff just because I think it's cool that I haven't even ever cracked the book open. I mean, there's so many cool things from just the artwork on the cover. Anything physical culture like that is just some cool stuff. I do have this one thing that was like, it was like a protein shake mixer, if you will, back in the day. It's basically a spoon, this long spoon that's spring loaded. And so you can like push it up and down and the spoon end spins in the cup. And so I don't use that, you know, it's just a cool thing. But, you know, from apparatus like that, old iron shoes to, you know, whatever, I do have a pretty cool, I do have a Sandow trophy, slightly different than the Mr. Olympia ones. Mr. Olympia ones were changed from the original one. But there's a guy, I think he's either in Australia or New Zealand, Eric, because I talked to you about him when I bought it. And he was able to procure one of the original that Sandow brought over from France to the US. And it used to be at Sid Klein's gym. This guy got it. And so he got talked into basically making a cast off of the original Sandow, which is what he did. And he had some made. And so I bought one of them during COVID. So I have this cool, basically, you know, as close as you can get to the original Sandow trophy. So that's pretty cool. I have another, which is not that cool. It's basically a knockoff of a Rodin sculpture, which I saw in Lausanne, Switzerland at the IOC headquarters, because I have a degree in sports nutrition from the IOC, and we had graduation in Lausanne. And so in their museum, they have, it's called the American Athlete, or Les Athlètes Américains by Rodin. And so I have one of those sculptures too. So I have the sculpture of Rodin's and the sculpture of the Sandow, you know, together. And those are pretty cool, because anybody who knows anything about, you know, physical culture will recognize those two pieces. But yeah, countless books. I mean, I still have the stuff from the 80s, you know, my hardcore bodybuilding and all that kind of stuff. I've got that. But then I've got lots of stuff from the 50s. I got lots of, you know, Vince Gironda's old stuff. I mean, literally, I live 30 seconds from his old gym, which is now Stoutburger. But it was, you know, 30 seconds down the road here in Studio City. And so I have, you know, a lot of his old stuff, you know, original programs, and some have been reprints, but there's just so much stuff, you know, like that is neat to have. I'm a big like Steve Reeves guy, you know, yes. So I have not gotten this framed yet. I bought this during COVID, but I have some original movie posters from the 50s of Steve Reeves that I want to get framed and put in the gym that are pretty big. So I think it's just kind of super cool, that homage to original, you know, physical culture. But the main thing is books. I've got so many books I haven't even cracked open. If I see something that I don't have that I think looks cool, and then I end up with duplicates of stuff sometimes. So yeah, so if you came over, I'd probably end up giving you a book.
I would be so honored if you did that. That would be badass. And that's like, I really do look forward to, I have some family in LA. Next time I'm coming out, dude, we got to hook up, because I would love to see that stuff. Yeah, man. If you are ever in Italy, there is a small gym outside of Bologna. If you're a big fan of Steve Reeves, and I'm looking through my own Instagram feed right now in my stories, because I know I posted it when I was there. But anyway, good friend of mine, Christian, and his partner Annalisa, they're the heads of the WNBF affiliate there, and they took me out to train at this gym because there's the gym owner, the original guy, I want to say he's in his 80s now, but he's trained with some of like the bodybuilding champions from back in the day in Italy, had, you know, hosted international competitions, and he's got like pictures up on the wall of when Grimmick beat Steve Reeves in like the 1948 Mr. Universe and stuff like that. And he's got like movie posters from the original Hercules and stuff like that.
Sure.
But it is a really cool gym. And it's called something Palestra. I can't quite remember the name of the gym, but if you're ever in Italy, definitely hit me up. I will let you know where that is. But it's like between sets was more fun than actually training, because it's just all over the walls. It's really, really cool. But so I love that stuff. And I know the cult does too. History, science, culture. I think you have immense experience, you have a historical perspective, and you have the true heart of a trainer. And I think there's a lot of gems here for anyone who is a personal trainer, is considering being one, is maybe wondering, is this the right job for me? Or how do I be more successful as a personal trainer? In addition to anyone who might be seeking out a personal trainer or has a family member or friend who is, some advice that they can be given. So I think there's a lot of gold here, and I hope people definitely listen to this one more than once. And I'll just say thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me. This is one thing I can do. I can talk about this stuff all day long. And I've been doing it for so long that, you forget sometimes some of the experiences you've had and people you've worked with and different things like that. I definitely think that if people focus on just creating good relationships with people, and that goes whether it's clients, whether it's other trainers, whether it's people but maybe they're working for right now, you just never know where things are going to end up. And so it's always good. Like, I would highly doubt you guys could talk to anybody in the fitness industry that didn't think that I was a good guy, that was like, oh no, that Chad's a real asshole behind closed doors. I think by and large, I have a good reputation all the way around. And that only happens by being authentic and genuine and being consistent. And that goes with every relationship. So I can't be having a conversation with you guys and then go and 2 weeks later be saying, oh man, those guys were jackasses, and start talking shit about people and whatever, it's but that happens all the time. People have such a need, I think, to feel like they're in the know and to share what they know, because now you'll know that I'm in the know too. And so all that type of kind of, back channel conversations and stuff like that go on that really shouldn't, I think is a problem. It's just create authentic relationships, and you don't know what'll come out of it. I get so many referrals of clients from people that I may not have ever even met in person. Maybe I've interacted with them online. Maybe they saw me speak somewhere, but they know that they can trust that I'm going to take care of people if they refer them to me, no matter how they become aware of me. And that's only from being consistent and being genuine with who you are as a person and as a professional. So I think if people work on fostering that and not on what the next shiny and new thing coming is, because I could have had ample opportunity to become a curves or a cuts gym, or become a CrossFit gym when things changed, or now I'm going to be a F45 affiliate, or whatever. But I didn't do that. I just took care of people in a consistent way that doesn't require anything fancy. It just requires the ability to show up and have a good time.
Well said, sir. Omar, it sounds like people just need to be better people. And for all the sociopathic listeners out there, just do your best to pretend, and fake it till you make it, and make sure you dig those holes deep and bury those bodies where they won't be found.
Man, as Ben House learned live on Iron Culture, sometimes you just got to put on the face of another to really feel like yourself. I will say that the basic concept of moral reciprocity is lost on most people, and I would go a step further in the social media sphere of the fitness industry. It's not even moral reciprocity, doing unto others as you want them to do unto you, but also extending, as Eric would say, that proverbial olive branch first can always make the difference, can make a very strong difference, where when you have no expectation upon the other, so you're helping someone out, like you see someone at the gym, you don't just think how society would function if how most people operate in the fitness industry is like, well, what are you going to do for me first? Like, what's your value? So it's like they have to prove themselves to you for you then to even consider either working with them, acknowledging them, interacting with them, any of these things. Society wouldn't function, right? Like that like it would implode. More reciprocity. It's like, okay, I want to treat others as I want to be treated. So I understand like I should be like kind, like generous, respectful, all those other things. But if you go a step further, just think about it like this. If someone's struggling at the gym, you're not like, oh, what's in it for me? Like I see this kid, like he kind of doesn't know how to squat. He seems lost. He seems unsure of himself. It's like he really could use someone's help. Is there any way I can weaponize this? Any way that I can financially gain from like how people tend to think? It's like, or does someone just need help? You help them out and you have no expectations at all for anything in the future. And it's wild that when you conduct yourself with a modicum of self-respect and integrity and all those other things, that it seems like your life trajectory will sort itself out, because people, especially when it's an in-person career, they could sense those things out. Like, oh, this guy isn't just in it for himself. Like, sure, there are the people, to Chad's point, that succeed by turning their clients into their steroid mules, but that doesn't mean that's the recipe for success.
It's a viable option. There's always the red pill, folks. I mean,
there is that pill. So I'll say,
there's always
Chad,
a possibility of 3 hots in a cot. So
yeah. Hey, we're learning 3-card Monty. We're learning so much. I will say, Chad, thank you so much for being on Iron Culture. We'll make sure to link that social media in the description to get you to 3,501 followers. Right. I also want to just give another cultural landstone, touchmark that we made. I butchered both as touchstone and landmark, but away we go. And that is that, touchmark. We're going to incorporating it.
Yep.
Eric, a little known fact is that Eric watched the seminal film In the Army Now with Paulie Shore. Didn't join the Army, the Air Force, because he knew the Army. He's like, the Army's beneath him. That the Air Force was the one for him. But that is the reason why Eric joined. And we'll get into that in another Iron Culture episode. But it has a special place for both of us, because whatever is special for Eric is special for me, Paulie Shore. So, Paulie, we know you're listening. You're one of the 30,000. We could just tell. Not that you work out, and not that you're even tangentially interested in lifting, but you're just one of the cult. We're here for you. And it doesn't matter if you're here for us, because, again, as we said, extending that proverbial olive branch. So thank you, everyone, for listening. You could go ahead.
I will just say you have the opportunity to have that Carrot Top revival, because we all know what prevented Carrot Top from getting the next level, which he obviously achieved, was getting ridiculously jacked. Yep. And looking like a poorly, not very symmetrical IFBB pro for at least a 6-month period.
Yep.
You can do that with us, but much smaller, because of course we promote the natural side of the lifting game. Anyway, but Omar, I'll let you close it out. But Paulie, offers on the table.
Yeah, Eric, that was a great touch mark. So I just want to thank everyone for listening to another episode of Iron Culture. You could go ahead and leave a rating review on iTunes. We are battling, Chad. We battle for supremacy. Numbers matter here, okay? Facts matter around here. And we're in the top 200 on iTunes in health and fitness. We are the number one in our minds, in the hearts of Iron Culture listeners, the number one fitness podcast. You can go ahead and leave a rating review. We tend to read a review every episode or every other episode. We thank you for leaving that review, and we'll see everyone every single Monday in that next episode.